Good morning, everyone. At least it's morning as I'm recording this. I want to give you my top 10 for Mounce and Greek for the rest of us in chapters 7, 8, and 9. Verbs are the heart of any language, including Koine or New Testament Greek. So let's get right to it. There's a lot to cover in these chapters. Let's start with chapter 7. It's kind of an easy start. In 7.1 through 7.7, you'll find things about English that should be mostly review for you. You can read through them quickly just to refresh your idea if you've forgotten any particular part of these sections, but they really should be mostly repetition. The exception may be the idea of mood. Mood is the relationship between a verb and reality. That's what Mounce says, and that is correct. Then in chapter 7.8 through the rest of the chapter, there is a discussion of a number of things. None of these should be particularly difficult. What's important is to understand and familiarize yourself with the way the concepts are expressed by the titles, the terms that are used for them. And those words are bold-faced in each of the paragraphs in these sections from 7.8 through 7.17. Aspect is the next idea in this chapter, and it's covered in 7.18 through 7.22. Aspect is a crucial idea when it comes to a Greek verb, and so read over these sections carefully, and you'll find that Mounce is going to repeat some things about aspect and talk about it repeatedly because it's so crucial to understanding the idea of a Greek verb in the New Testament. I'll be talking about it more to you as well as we look at the next couple of chapters. But chapter 7 should be kind of an easy chapter for you. Again, it's the idea of mood and the idea of aspect that are really crucial, along with the terms that you find in 7.8 through 7.22. So let's move on to chapter 8. In chapter 8, in sections 1 through 4, you'll find ideas that you've already encountered, and you can refresh those ideas again as you begin to read this chapter. But, and this is a very important but, the important thing is what 8.4 says about the information your software will display for you. Your software is going to be able to help you tremendously in your course. As opposed to learning Greek by memory, your software is going to be the memory and the analyzer for you. And so when Mounce says in 8.4 that the software is going to parse information for you and tell you the verb's person and number, that's going to be very important for you. It's going to tell you the lexical form of the verb as well and give you a basic definition. So your software is going to help you out a lot. You won't have to memorize a lot of things. But 8.4 is worth taking a look at to see what your software is going to do for you. 8.5 is review. We've heard this before. Mounce has talked about lexical form before in the text. 8.6 is not really very important. You can read over it once, then let go of it, except to know that there is something called a Strong's number and a GK number. It enables an English reader of the Bible to go back to the underlying Greek word. You won't need to use that very much. Your software will display it for you, and you can learn how to use it. But your software will also give you an interlinear display very easily, or you can put an English Bible beside the Greek on your software and begin to get the same kind of information. My number 4 point in my top 10 is about 8.6 through 10. In these sections, chapter 8, section 6 through section 10, Mounce returns to aspect. And he talks about it correctly. It is primary. It is more important than time. When we in English think about verbs, we think about their time reference. This is a part of what a Greek verb means as well, but it's a secondary part. When a Greek person in Koine or in the New Testament uses a verb, they're thinking about the kind of action that is taking place, not the time of action. So when you come to any Greek verb, think aspect first. Think aspect first. Think aspect primarily. And think time second. It takes practice to do that, but it pays rewards to you to do this. And there are only three aspects: continuous action, undefined action, the action simply happens or happened, and perfective action that has happened but continues to have effects of some kind that carry on in the present and may well carry on into the future. My top point number 5 for you concerns chapter 8 and sections 11 through 13, and these discuss tense. So let's repeat. In Greek, a verb carries two ideas, aspect and then time, in that order. And in Greek, there are 5 tenses whose aspect and time are laid out for you and displayed in a chart in chapter 8 and section 12. Note on that chart the word normally at the top of the time column. That word normally is there because of what Mounce tells you in 8.13. Don't stress about these unusual to us verb tenses, the way a verb expresses time in Greek. Remember that aspect is primary. Don't stress about the fact that when you see a verb that in English might mean one kind of time, it can mean more than one kind of time in Greek. Your software, though, won't sort this out for you, but Mounce will cover some of the ways this happens, and commentators will almost always discuss when a Greek verb like a past tense, like an aorist or an imperfect, is used with a time reference that does not refer to the past. My point number 6 out of my top 10 this week for you concerns 8.14 through 8.20 in chapter 8, sections 14 through 20. Mounce goes back through the 5 tenses that you met in 8.12 and the tenses that were displayed in the chart there. But do distinguish the idea of the imperfect tense, continuous action, normally in past time, from the aorist tense, undefined action, normally in past time. The imperfect tense says something was happening. The aorist tense simply says something happened. There's a difference. The imperfect tense looks at the action as though it was happening continuously in front of your eyes in past time. The aorist tense says, quite simply, the action just happened. And in 8.19, be sure to notice the concept of the perfect tense, how action happens in the past but continues to influence the present. In 8.20, Mounce introduces the indicative mood. The indicative mood describes what the writer considers real or true, factual. Mounce says it is, in quotation marks, as opposed to what may be or might be, in quotation marks. I call the indicative mood the mood of fact or truth, because that's what the writer uses the mood for. In the writer's opinion, when the indicative mood is used, the writer is stating something the writer believes to be factual or truthful. That's the basic sense of the indicative mood. Finally, then, for this week, let's move on to chapter 9. In sections 1 through 3 of chapter 9, Mounce talks about aspect for a third time. Can you tell yet that aspect is primary and most important when it comes to understanding a Greek verb? I hope so. If an author talks about anything 3 times, you know it's important. Aspect is important in Greek verbs. It's primary. The first mood Mounce covers, though, in this chapter is the second mood of the Greek verb. It's the subjunctive mood. The indicative mood is what I call the mood of fact or truth in the mind of the person who's writing in the indicative mood in the New Testament. The subjunctive mood is what Mounce calls one step removed from reality. Reality is the mood of the indicative. Subjunctive is the mood of probability or possibility. Most of the time, that's what it describes. As opposed to what is, the subjunctive mood talks about what may be or might be. Then my number 8 in the top 10 for this week is in chapter 9 in sections 4 through 6. This is where Mounce covers the imperative mood. The imperative mood is the mood that's used when someone wants to give a command. It can also sometimes be used less directly to express an exhortation. What's an exhortation? An exhortation is when somebody says, let's do this. It's not quite a command like you do this. It's usually expressed in the first person plural in the New Testament. Let us do this. But it is in the imperative mood because it's directing in a less forceful way than you do this. It's directing a group of people to do something. And the imperative mood is used to make those kinds of commands or directions. Here's my point number 9 for this week. In 9.8, Mounce covers the participial mood. That's what it's really called. More simply, you can just call it the participle. Mounce correctly describes a participle as a verbal adjective, and I call it the platypus mood. You know, a platypus is half one thing and half another. Well, that's exactly what a participle is. A participle looks and works to create meaning in Greek, partly like a verb and partly like an adjective. If you're thinking this is like a multi-purpose tool in a tool belt, you're right. The participle in Greek is used for many purposes when Greek writers write in the New Testament. The participle can even be a stand-in for a noun. It can be used like an adjective, it can be used like an adverb, it can be used like a noun. Those are its 3 most common uses. When it stands in for a noun, it's called a substantive, or I call it a noun substitute. But you'll find that term in grammars and commentaries. A substantive participle is a participle that's taking the place or substituting for a noun. My final point in the top 10 this week is found in chapter 9 and sections 9 through 15. In these sections, Mounce reviews active and passive voice first, and then he moves on in 9.11 to talk about the basic idea behind the middle voice. We have nothing quite like the middle voice in English, but Mounce does a good job of describing it. The middle voice is a voice that describes an action in which the actor, the subject, is affected by the action in some way. Middle voice is also found with what are called deponent verbs. At least that's what they used to be called. Today, the whole idea of deponency, lacking forms, is up for discussion among scholars of New Testament Greek. But they were originally called deponent verbs because they seemed to lack active voice forms. Whether they are truly lacking those forms, or whether they are meant to function one way, and they were not considered deponent by those who wrote them, allowing them to mostly express active voice, but sometimes not. That's a subject for debate among New Testament Greek scholars today. You don't need to know or pay attention to that debate as you begin, And so you can translate them as Mounce encourages you to do, as in a way in English that expresses their concept, that the subject, the actor who is performing the action of the verb in the middle voice, is somehow acting upon himself or herself, somehow, or somehow the action is affecting the subject. That's a lot, I know. These are very important chapters, though, so be certain to give them enough time that you feel at least like you've begun to put your feet on solid ground when it comes to the concepts that concern Greek verbs that are found in these chapters. If you have any questions, if you'd like to get in touch with me about anything, please feel free to do that. You can reach me by email, or we can text or talk. I am here for you to try to help you grasp as much as you can out of these and all the chapters in Mounce.